On this podcast, I talk all about those hard money conversations. But why? Because handling your finances can be stressful. So if you're feeling stressed over money, I want to help you. Head on over and grab my free Stop Money Stress Now guide. This will help you learn how to stop money stress, work through a budget, and get yourself organized. Because when we're organized, we're able to see things a little bit more clearly with less emotion. So head over to laurencabello.com/podcast and grab your free guide now. Now, back to the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Hard Money Talk Show. Today we're going to be talking about another hard money topic because that's what we do here on this show. And this one is kind of one of those topics where you're like, I never thought about that. Today we're going to be talking to Erin Reiland, who is a certified eating disorder coach and also a recovering or recovered woman who has dealt with an eating disorder herself. And we're going to talk about how eating disorders manifest themselves financially. How do they affect your money? How do they affect your spending? How do they affect your financial decisions? And specifically, we're going to be talking about anorexia, but also other eating disorders in this episode. But you would think this is kind of my take on it, right? Is like, okay, so you're anorexic, you don't eat, you must save money on food. That's not what happens. If you've listened to my show for any sort of time, you will know that this can manifest, any addiction can manifest into other sorts of addiction. So I highly am excited to bring on Erin to the show today. So let's go get into the interview. All right, Erin, thank you so much for being on the show today and coming on and talking to us about, eating disorders and how they affect our finances. I think that that's a huge topic a lot of people don't even think about probably.
No, you know what? When you had in contact, I literally it was like I had to think about, wow, how much money goes into this. I mean,
Mm.
I hadn't even thought about it, and then I thought about it, and I was like, this is such a good topic because no, it's not spoken about or thought
Mm-hmm.
about how much I've probably spent or my insurance or my family over the 20 years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's interesting that I brought it up to you and it
Mhm.
wasn't even something that you had thought about, even though, so this is probably something that you can incorporate into your coaching as well,
Yeah.
with helping people with their recovery. So tell us, I mean, I did an intro beforehand about you, but I want to hear your story. Like what, you have your website In Love Body Coaching, and I love your Instagram. And you teach people, right, how to like explain what you do for a living, and then explain I want to know a little bit about your story.
Yeah. So what I do now is I became certified. So I'm a certified disordered eating, anxiety, trauma. And then I use breath work as well and NLP psychology to work with women within the realm of you know, eating disorders, but it branches out to, trauma, anxiety, and things of that nature. So I work with women to just get them wherever they're at in recovery, or maybe they've never been in recovery and they've like reached out to me like, hey, I think I have a problem, or
Mm-hmm.
something like, hey, I'd like some more tools. And so I do this. I work with them one to one, and it's been such an amazing experience. Not only like I feel like they teach me,
Mm-hmm.
so much, and it's been a blessing because truly, honestly, I really, really I never thought I would recover. I
Mm.
just kind of assumed or taken on like this is my life because I consider myself fully recovered
Okay.
from my eating disorder. That's how, I mean, there's different ways, but I am fully recovered for 7 years.
That's awesome.
And
Congratulations.
thank you. Yet never imagined it to be that way
Mm-hmm.
because 15, 20 years of my life was my eating disorder
Mm.
completely encompassed my entire world. And so I I think my last treatment center, so I'd been in and out of residential treatment centers, which is different than inpatient, but it's long term sometimes, but I had been through so many that I thought, okay, here's another one.
Mm.
Okay, okay, Erin, let's get your weight back. Okay, let's get whatever. But I think it finally is just, you get tired of it, but also the reality that I was dying.
Mm.
And even though I'd heard that when I was younger, it didn't really sink in. And I have a 13-year-old son now, but he was 7, 6 at the time, 7 at the time, and having to FaceTime him across the country with a tube in my nose,
Mm.
looking at him, oh, it still breaks my heart.
Mm.
Looking at him on FaceTime, it was still emotional because it's like, dang, you don't realize it really fully until you look back. And I saw that, and the doctors are like, Erin, this is no joke. Like, you are going to die.
Mm.
And it was, okay, well, what do I have to do? Finally, like being like, uh-oh, like I'm older. I can't maybe manipulate my body, and just being truly scared, and enough to where I decided, you know what? I need to live for myself, but for my son, and just to have a life. And
Mhm.
so I released my control, which was grip tight the whole 20 years. I released my control to professionals and had to put trust in them that they knew better than I did. Very, very hard.
Mm.
It's another thing, super hard.
Mhm.
And listen and go through the whole process. Treatment, step down, oh gosh, day programs, all of that.
Mhm.
Continuing the treatment and doing it. And it was a whole nother year of going through what was keeping me in so much pain.
Mm.
Not that surface, oh, I have this problem or that problem, but really digging deep. And that was hard.
Mm.
But when I started to see, wow, I can handle that pain. I'm not going to die. Uh, it's going to make you stronger. It was so many layers, but throughout it all, what I really came to know is I can go on, or I'll die, or I can go on like this.
Mm.
So when I finally was in a place where I felt I could help others, that's when I left my job in academia. I was at Stanford for 12 years,
Wow.
right? I was chilling there. Like
Yeah.
it was it's a good job.
Yeah.
I could have stayed there my whole life. And some people were like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "This is not my call. I know what I need to do now."
Mm.
So I left, and then I started bringing in some more education and what my experience is, and that's kind of how I've now I am where I'm at.
I always say that we need to turn. I feel like, I'm a believer in God, but what other people, say that
Mhm.
we need to turn our mess into our message, and that's
Yeah.
how I got to where I am too. I was in a ton of debt, 18 years ago, and learned how to get out of it and learned how to recover from my spending addiction. And that's how I started
Ugh.
doing this. And um, really, I was a drug and alcohol counselor before I had kids, and been doing this online for 13 years now. But to use that like experience, for you, I think it means so much more. Like when I'm teaching people how to get out of debt, it's like I've been there, I've done that, I know that.
Yeah.
You are teaching people, how to recover from an eating disorder. You've been there, you've done that, the feelings, you know the secrets, the things they're
Yeah.
hiding, the
Right.
manipulation. You're like, come on now,
That's what.
you
Yeah,
know,
for sure.
you're like, I've done it all.
That's how I am.
Yeah, right. So
Yeah.
when you were in the hospital, you were talking about that time with the tube in your nose. Like, are there people, and this is just because I am very uneducated on eating disorders, and I'm going to come at it from that role, right? As somebody
Awesome.
who's uneducated. Um I mean, I know a little bit. Like I've had a couple friends over the years who have had one was anorexic, and then I've had a couple friends who struggled with bulimia.
Mhm.
Do you find that there are anorexics, there's bulimics, and then there's people that just do it all, right? Like, where did you fit in with your eating disorder? Where did you struggle?
And so that's what I love, like, asking, like, because I'm always like, it's about awareness and
Right.
kind of giving, because yeah, a lot of people think eating disorders, you think of anorexia
Mm-hmm.
or bulimia, but there's like so many. There's binge eating disorder.
Right.
They have treatment. It's finally like recognized as an actual, eating disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this whole ram ones who over exercise,
Yep.
orthorexia, who are, obsessed with different what's okay to eat, what's not, just like, is it healthy? Is it gluten free? But not like that's bad, but as an example. But
Right.
I, my main struggle was anorexia.
Okay.
And there were times where it would come in, or I'd use bulimic tendencies because there's, diet pills, laxatives.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say bulimia, it could be not just the purging type.
Right.
So I think I've gone through every single part of an eating disorder you could have, but my main base, I think I could say, was that definitely anorexia.
Okay. And what was the
Yeah.
lowest weight you got down to? Is that an okay question to
Well,
ask?
so it is and it's not.
Okay.
So I
Okay, so
never.
forgive me if that's like a rude
Okay.
question, but I just
No.
think I just want people to be able to like understand, like, because you're literally like on the like
Yeah.
dying.
Death.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I always, when I work with clients, unless it's medically necessary, like I'm working with a doctor and a dietitian and her, the woman, and we have a contract type thing with her.
Hmm.
Um, I don't do weights with them.
Okay.
I'm like, no.
Yep.
But and I usually don't like to say things, but just for like intentive purposes, for so
Hmm.
people can understand. I mean, I was at a normal weight. I mean, I probably could have looked like this, but been dying at some
Hmm.
points because
Right.
of what I was doing. But I'm also 6 feet tall,
Oh, okay.
right? So I'm super tall, and I'd always be jealous of those short girls that were like, well, I'm 80 pounds and I don't want to gain weight, or I'm 90 pounds. And all it is that disorder and
Mm-hmm.
addiction going, why am I not that?
Mm-hmm.
I need to be that. And so of course, being 6 feet tall, if I ever went under 100 pounds, I would be dead.
Right.
I think that's probably what my bones weigh, you
Right.
know, like, so it was an unobtainable thing, but my eating disorder was like, You're a crap until you get to under 99, 100 pounds."
Mm-hmm.
I think really the lowest I got was probably like 120.
Mm-hmm.
I think one night, I think I was happy. And see, this is so many years ago. I
Right.
think that I think I got to about like 118 pounds, and that wasn't good.
Right.
But
That
I
was
was
like,
young,
yeah.
so my body could handle it more. And when I got older, I could be a lot heavier
Mm-hmm.
or way more, but be way sicker.
Right.
So it was always, and the dietitians always give you that weight range they like you to
Right.
be in. And I disagreed completely with it, believe me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was like, you know nothing. But now, after everyone, my weight range, I've settled out.
Mm-hmm.
Erin, leave your crap, let it go after a while. And I'm at like, the lower end of my weight range, which I never would have thought.
Mm-hmm.
But I was literally just dying
Mm.
inside. And I do that a lot on my Instagram, and I never do a lot of body shots because I don't like to do that, because it almost is like an inspiration, sadly,
Mm. Yeah.
for some. And that's a whole other thing of like being inspired by these girls. You look at it. And so I never want people to be like, take that, because I would.
Mm-hmm.
I'd look at it and be like, you know?
Right.
But I do like those throwback Thursdays of very sick Erin and me now.
Mm-hmm.
And even looking at my eyes, you could see dying. But there are so many times where it's like, and I can look back now going, you look really sick, Erin.
Mm.
But it's not, because in the moment you don't see it.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, there's just no way. I'm so tall.
Mhm.
It's
Well, and
like
you
I'm
think about I think that they say that what the eyes are the windows to the soul, right? I can look back on times in my life where, when I was because I went through a divorce about 5 years ago. I look back on pictures during that time and I can see in my eyes that I
yeah,
was just so sad,
yeah,
and I'm like, "Oh, like sad
right?
Lauren." You know what I mean? Like, but
Even with, like, the
I can see that.
smile,
Right, even
you
with a
know,
smile,
you're like,
my eyes were sad. And
I have
I can tell that. I
yes,
don't know if other people can, but I can tell that,
I
you know?
me too.
Yep.
Yep.
So, so let's kind of talk about like, I mean, you would think that, you know, I'm just going to be, this is the Hard Money Talk show. So I just tell things like it is, right? I would think in my mind, I think, okay, somebody who's anorexic they must be saving money because they're
Yeah,
not buying money for food. Like their grocery budget must be super low, but then
yeah,
I think, okay, there's probably things going on that we don't think about. So let's educate people on the financial um, downfalls, maybe the things that you were spending money on when you were in your addiction to fill that void that you weren't getting from whatever, from food or from whatever, and then
yeah.
talk about the financial implications of recovering from that, right? You mentioned insurance, you mentioned your family,
Mhm.
your kids. So what are some things like as you're in your addiction, right? And you're basically starving yourself.
Mhm.
What are your finances like? What are your spending habits like during that time? What are the things you like to spend money on? How do they is your are your finances okay? Like what do you typically think about back then? And even looking at maybe clients that you have now, maybe you can even now that you're thinking about this, maybe
Right.
like, oh, they're all spending money on these things, right?
Yeah, and I actually have been, which is just so, you think I knew I had good insurance, this or that, but then it's now with my clients, I'm like, why do you have that gym membership? You don't need a gym. We're not supposed to be at the gym.
Mhm.
It's not so like I mean, for me with the anorexia, yeah, you'd think, dang, I got lots of money. I'm not buying any food,
Right.
right? And so when I worked, at Stanford, I made good money, right? But the amount of stuff, so I would buy gym memberships, multiple
Mm.
places.
Oh, multiple gym memberships.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because when I actually would go to the gym, now sometimes I never went.
Mhm.
So I would just have them. And it was kind of like that the addiction mindset of at least if I have it, I don't need it, but I still have it just in
Mhm.
case.
Right. Interesting. Okay.
Right. So so I think that what I spent most of my money on was clothes
Mm.
that I wanted to fit, that I would buy smaller purposely,
Oh, okay.
and which was unreal, let me tell you. I mean, and that was a lot of money. And then it would be buying clothes. I mean, I also had that addiction, the addictive type personality.
Mhm.
Not eating sort of early, but I had the shopping addiction. Oh
Mm.
my goodness. So it was buying stuff like that. It was buying things for other people because I had guilt,
Mm.
um, that I was not a good friend. Then when I had my son, oh my gosh, I've never seen so much stuff he never used, but I like purchased it for that fact.
Mm.
Or I bought food for other people. I bought food to make and give to other people. And so it's very interesting how much one can spend when they're not eating.
So that's interesting. So talk about because you're not the first. So what I had a friend that was anorexic. I've had a couple actually, and they had this obsession with cooking. So they would cook for other people. They would cook because they love to cook, but then they would give it all away.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Is
that
that
is
something that's common?
I would it's 50-50.
Okay.
So some people that want nothing to do with the kitchen
Hmm.
stay as far away as possible, or the ones that are great cooks, cook so much and do what you're talking about. And it makes them like, or feel better, but almost like as if they're eating it.
Okay.
And so there goes money.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of money on things to make myself feel better. Whatever that may be, just stuff like you don't need to get, Erin. You don't need random light cellulite light things, sessions. Why are you buying that? Like
Mm.
it was just, scales, things that you don't really think about, but then you start looking and it
Mm-hmm.
adds up so quickly that then you're in trouble.
Right.
And like with bulimics, it could be like the food.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of friends and clients spend so much money on food,
Mm-hmm.
like could hundreds of dollars a day.
Wow.
It's bad. Like it's people don't really realize how bad I think the addiction goes and how much money they spend on food that they don't ever keep inside of them.
Just to
And
eat it and then purge it.
yeah, and then they have the guilt
Mm-hmm.
of that. Um, and then with binge eating disorder, it's the overconsumption of that. And then you have everything in between with buying, diet pills,
Right.
laxatives. Those things are expensive.
Mm-hmm. I was actually going to ask that about the diet pills and the laxative and the cleanses and the Botox and the, whatever else you can get to make your external look
Yeah.
better, right?
Yeah,
Um,
always.
mhm,
Always trying. It's almost if I look okay, I'm okay.
mhm,
And so I spent so much money on that kind of stuff too. I
mm,
mean, thousands probably,
right,
I'm sure, because nothing was ever right or enough.
right.
Or you have the ones that hide. There's a whole so it's like this total it could be a very wide range, but you have a lot of people that will hide, and so they buy a lot of things that will cover them up, or clothes, but things that hide them, or that they can hide from others.
So like a big black trench coat and big sunglasses so that they
Yeah, wearing
can't see them.
sweatshirts and
Mhm,
jackets in the summer and things like that, or buying stuff that they want to buy, like wear
mhm.
that, but then they never wear it because they're too scared people will see them.
Okay.
And I've been in that place too.
So it's interesting you were talking about buying the clothes in sizes too small on purpose. Would you say, because I'm thinking to myself like, okay, I've got four kids. I'm a single mom of four. My oldest is a son, and then I have three daughters. And I've never had any body image issues, thankfully. But I think about my three daughters, right? I and which one of them could have some eating issues, right? And when you mentioned that, I thought, oh, that could be like a red flag that I can look out for. Like if my girls start coming home and purchasing clothing that I know is very much too small for them, and then what do you hang it up and look at it? Like this is the inspiration of this is what I want to
Yeah.
get to.
Yeah, and keep trying them on
Okay.
like every day,
See if they
every
fit.
every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And then what that does is make you feel even worse. So it keeps you going. And yeah, especially because I'm a single mom to a 13-year-old boy.
Mm-hmm.
And even he's 6 feet tall. So he's my height
Mm-hmm.
at 13. And I can say there are body conscious things for him for being
Mm-hmm.
so tall. And so it's so interesting to watch it, but also know like, I think like a statistic is 80% of third and fourth grade girls
Mm-hmm.
have thought about, look at, think they should be on a diet or feel they are too fat.
Yep.
That's astounding.
My
Terrifying.
youngest is in third grade, and she's a twig. And she told me a couple weeks ago that she thought she was fat, and I was like she literally is a beanpole. She's tiny, and that was the first one of my children that has ever said that to me. And it
Yeah.
broke my heart because it's like you
Right.
want to be able to say, but you're beautiful,
Yeah.
and that like my therapist, because I always talk about therapy on here. I'm a huge proponent of therapists
I
and
have
therapy.
one.
Yeah. So it's like
I totally
talking to that little girl inside of you, right? Of like, you are beautiful. Why
yeah.
do I say I'm not beautiful? What are the things I have to go through? And I'm sure in your journey of working towards being recovered, there was a lot of that, speaking to that little girl and all of that. But I think about like warning signs, even from a little child to a grown woman. Like, how can people, I think that one you said about the clothing and buying it to, like, I would have never thought about that
Yeah.
I would have never, my mind would have never gone there. So thank you for
Right.
bringing that up. I think that's what's so important about shows like this, is we can bring up those topics and people be like, oh.
Yeah. Because I think, eating disorders are very they're hard. They're so complicated
Mhm.
and not one person is the same, but there are those, characteristics that kind of, type A perfection. A lot of the time, I mean, I knew I was when I didn't get straight A's,
Mm,
it would throw me. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be perfect.
mm,
I wanted to be something, because there wasn't social media way
right.
back in my day of that nature that, I had an ideal in my head that was unobtainable.
Mhm.
And so now with social media and this and that, it makes it very easy for girls and guys to look at things that aren't real.
Mhm.
Even as adults, we can be, "What? Oh, it's photoshopped, it's not real, it's, you know, a snapshot of that person," but children, they don't see that.
Right.
All they see is, this thing that is really not real, and so
Mhm.
it's always, like, looking out for that, looking out for, cutting out different foods. They start cutting out foods, or not eating a lot, pushing the stuff around the plate, taking
Mhm.
lunch, or when they're not that, they'll bring the lunch home sometimes, but then they get smart.
Okay.
And they toss the lunch or, things of that, and they're, "Oh, I don't want a snack. No, I'm good."
Mhm.
Or they start exercising out of nowhere,
Mm.
and you're like, "Well, I just wanna be fit." It's like, "Well, you've never exercised a day in your life."
Right.
You know? That
All of a
kind of thing.
sudden.
Yeah, and just being really preoccupied or on things that should not be, you know, they shouldn't be on, or
Mhm.
things like that, and just feeling really bad about themselves.
Right.
And it's eye-opening thing that now this has changed so much. They have so much more to deal with
Right.
than when I did, and I feel like I had a lot to deal with
Right.
with
Yeah, and social
outside
media,
pressure.
I think that's a good thing to bring up, is the social media piece, right? And I've tried to keep my kids off of social media as long as I mean, they're not on, I think my one daughter um has TikTok, but she has like a limit, of an hour a day, and that's it. But the other girls, like, I try to monitor and excuse me, I try and monitor and keep them off of it as much as possible, because there's that comparison, right? Of like, oh,
Yeah,
this person,
horrible.
she's so beautiful, or she's so skinny, or I'm never going to look like that. Um and do you find that, like, how has social media brought, I'm trying to think of like a financial aspect of how social media could get involve finances, like from my, like, I just got back from a conference which talked all about social media, and I can see people spending so much money on hiring photographers, hiring videographers, hiring photo editors, doing model shoots, doing this, doing that, for people that don't want to hide, um, to become famous or whatever, because they're trying to get famous. Do you think somebody who's dealing with an eating disorder would want to put themselves in that spotlight? Or do you, I mean, it could be like some people
Yeah,
do,
it's
some
like
people
either
don't.
it's literally like, I mean, there's, the gray area, but it's really what I've seen or what I've experienced is it's pretty no.
Mhm.
I won't even put a profile picture up. A client of mine, she won't,
Okay.
but she'll be on there scrolling.
But she won't put a profile picture up.
Nope,
Really?
will not post,
Huh.
nothing.
Okay.
So there's like that. And then I have other ones who are obsessed. And I'm like, okay, we've got to roll this back a little. Social and I have literally, I think I did a post on it recently of like unfollow social media accounts that make you feel bad.
Right.
And I've had to do that with clients because they'll see this. And when you start looking at all like, celebrities or whatever, then a lot more sponsored ads come up.
Right.
Then a lot more things. Here, get this makeup. Oh, try this. Oh, and a lot of it's beauty focused.
Mhm.
Lose the weight. Oh my gosh, this will make you suck in your non-existent that fat wherever you think it is. And I know that's a problem. And I know even when I'm on my own and these things come up and I'm like, how did this come into my feed?
Right.
Like I never looked at this, how whatever algorithm they use, but it pops up no matter what. So if you have teenage daughters, sons, and they're on Instagram or a lot of other platforms, they're sponsored ads.
Yep.
That's how they make money. And those sponsored ads can be just so off base that it's like destructive. It's harming.
Mhm.
And they buy all this crap. And I'm like, how'd that make you feel good? Okay, when they got it, well, how's that working out for you? Well, I haven't used it or tried it.
Mhm.
Okay, like
So
what are you gonna do about this?
so social media is actually robbing them for money because of who they're looking at and who they're
Yep.
following, and then the
Mhm.
sponsored ads that are coming in,
Yeah.
and then the hope of this is going to help me lose that fat or look better or whatever. And I always think about just in general, if somebody is dealing with an eating disorder but also wanting to be rich and famous, right, as an influencer, let's say, all of the kinds, everybody, it just seems like so many people want to lose weight and be influencers and famous, and that's how they're going to make money. How much money they can spend on becoming famous if they want to try something like that too, or even any job, getting the job or getting the
Yeah.
boyfriend or getting the, just to look and appear that they have it all together. Cause I've been in that boat
Yeah.
myself,
No, me
you know?
too. And yet it works or it makes you feel better for a very it's like fleeting
Well, it's
and
that
it's gone.
rush of
Yes, that
dopamine and
endorphin,
oxytocin. Yep. And then once
and then
that wears
it's
off,
gone, and
yeah.
then you gotta go buy more.
Mhm.
And so you have these people, yes, that wanna if they wanna be influencers and are convinced and I have to have all these professional things. I have to be a certain way. And unfortunately, you see a lot like of these influencers, they are very thin.
Mhm.
They look beautiful, but how much have they spent? And not that it matters, but they probably spent a lot more than the average person who goes snaps a picture outside their door.
Right. Yep. It's true.
And
It's
it's
so
like
true.
it's almost like this it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy of like what's gonna happen. But if they do it, then they get to wherever they want to get sometimes.
Mhm.
But then it's like we gotta buy more, you gotta do more, you gotta spend more to
Right.
keep up this appearance that really isn't maybe not them.
Mhm.
Maybe it is. Maybe
Yep.
it's not. They spend a lot of money.
So we've talked a lot about addiction transference on this show a couple times, which means, you have one addiction that goes to another. And we've had a gambling addict. We've had a couple gambling addicts on the show. We've had a couple alcoholics on the show whose addiction went to. Um, I actually have a couple friends who got like gastric bypass surgery and then they became alcoholics after the gastric bypass. That's kind of, I've seen that happen a lot, especially working in the addictions industry, that would happen a lot. So, and a lot of alcoholics, a lot of times turn to spending. Have
Mhm.
you seen any kind of addiction transference when people are trying to recover from an eating disorder? Do they tend to sway to a certain other addiction, would you say? Have you seen that?
Yeah. No, 100%. And I think that like even for me, it was, I mean, kind of co-occurring.
Mhm.
So if I I felt like, okay, I'm doing better with my eating disorder. Okay, great. What happens? I'd go spend a lot of money,
Mhm.
or I would drink a lot. So it
Okay.
was like, I kind of would go back and forth, but always went back to my eating disorder because that was just my comfort. But I
Mhm.
think it's also an addiction. I mean, yes, eating disorders are mental illnesses, but it's an addiction. So cross addictions are really common.
Okay.
And when I was in treatment, almost every single one of them would have us go to an NA or an AA meeting every week if we are allowed to leave.
Okay. Because that was
So,
something.
oh
Yep.
yeah,
Yep. Yep.
it's definitely a thing which adds in more money that you're
Right.
spending.
Because you're
Very
drinking a
true.
lot. Yep. I was wondering that if more like amphetamine type of drugs were common in the eating disorder space, like cocaine and
Mhm.
meth and stuff like that, to increase your metabolism or give you more energy.
I don't know what. Yes, and they would take 5 billion diet pills with caffeine,
Mhm.
like so many that I was like, how did you take that much?
Right.
And in treatment, you talk to each other and you hear about it. And I'm like, and then you get ideas, and then it's a whole other ball game.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I definitely used drugs to speed, like, I don't know if it sped up my metabolism or just
You just
made
thought
it
it
so I
would
didn't,
gave you more energy to like do all the things that you wanted to do.
which was probably nothing.
Right.
Like, I don't think I got anything done. I think I
Mhm.
just was like, oh, I'm not eating for 3 days.
Mm.
This is awesome.
Mhm.
But I didn't get anything done.
Right.
It actually made me like in my head. And that's what I couldn't do. I couldn't deal
Mm.
with it because I was like, I'm in my head. And so the drugs, I was like, I can't do that.
Right.
It's even worse for me to be spinning about my issues than paying a lot of money for these drugs,
Mhm.
where I was like, well, I'll just not eat.
Right. So that's another place where you're bleeding money, let's say,
Oh
um,
yeah.
with
Oh,
with this. Okay, so now you decide, you have that moment where you're like, I'm sick and tired of living this way. I want to live, right?
yeah.
Now we start talking about, you mentioned very early on about, now you have insurance costs. And you have, obviously, probably rehab costs, therapy costs, insurance costs, medical costs. So now we're talking about financial costs after. So what does that look like? Like when you want to start recovering from this,
Mhm.
how do you set yourself up financially? Is it a pre-existing condition that you have to worry about if you're going
So
to get
get a new
into, yeah.
insurance. So I've never, I don't technically know because I haven't had anyone. So that was my worry too. So I kind of, with Stanford, I was able to keep the same insurance, so
Nice.
they couldn't boot me,
Okay.
even if they did not like me. I'm telling you that much. Oh my gosh, for real, they did
Yeah.
not like me. They're like, oh my gosh. Um, but when someone wants to get into, it's not considered a pre-existing condition because it's
Okay.
a mental health issue. Although I think, I'm sure some insurance companies can try to pull that, but when I know getting into recovery, meant finding a doctor, a therapist, and a lot of doctors, that's the other issue, switching doctors because they don't understand eating disorders.
Mhm.
Um, Therapists, psychiatrists, nutritionists, and that can be a lot and
Oh,
overwhelming.
nutritionist. I didn't think about that. That's a very important part of this,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, I think I had a nutritionist dietitian for 4 years after I fully recovered, but you have it in and out of treatment. And so when you get in to those places, you have co-pays. So say you have a
Mm.
good insurance and you're still paying, I don't know, whatever it is. I had good insurance where Stanford was paying half or three-fourths,
Right.
and I paid the other, but that was still $200 every 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Think about how expensive it is if you don't have a really good, job, how much they're paying, but how much I'm paying. Then you
Mhm.
have the co-pays all the time. And if I'm going to see 5 doctors every week, it adds up real quick.
Right.
I mean, real quick. And so there's all of that. But then if you have to go into the hospital or they're more willing to pay for hospital because it's cheaper for them, but it's still your copay to get in if you're admitted,
Mm-hmm.
or all the stuff they bill, and then here's what you owe, your portion, and it can be so varying. But I mean, I've had people who their copays are $1,000 if you have to be admitted into a hospital. If you're
Wow.
going into the hospital every month for being sick, it's pretty bad, you know? And so, and then a lot of people unfortunately don't have the resources to get residential treatment centers. And so if they don't have that and they have family who can somehow help, the family shelling out and they'll work with you. I mean, the family could shell out, I don't know, 50,000, 100,000,
Mm-hmm.
because a treatment center on average is $30,000 a month.
Oh my goodness.
And it could go up at 30 to 50,000
Okay.
a month.
Wow.
Now they'll work. I mean, I guess they'll work with you if you're self-pay, but that's why if you don't have insurance, most people don't get treatment. And
Right.
that's a whole other thing I'm very passionate with. There has to be mental health treatment coverage in insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Because even with mine, I spent so much with you go to residential treatment centers, you have to have money for all these different random things that are outside of the treatment
Mm-hmm.
that you have to pay that you don't think about.
Right.
And so all the flight there, the it adds up. And when I literally thought about how much I had spent and my insurance, it has to be close to at least $500,000, maybe $750,000 over the 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's crazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
I
you
could
had
see,
you had the insurance, right?
yeah.
So I think about somebody who has a child
Mhm,
that needs treatment,
mhm,
but they don't have insurance to provide the care for their child in the right way.
yeah.
And so what do they do to get their child the help that they think they need? Right? Like, so
Yeah.
as somebody who was an addictions counselor, we always say that that person needs to hit their bottom before they're going to go get help. And I say this from a personal thing. Like, my brother was a heroin addict. And so I grew up with him going to treatments and jail and treatments and jail for like 10 years before he eventually died. He actually committed suicide from his addiction about 14 years ago. No, actually more than that. It's been 16 years. So I watched him go in and out of treatment, in and out of treatment. I watched my parents sacrifice financially so much for him
Mhm.
because if he left early, it was like they had to pay the balance because the insurance wouldn't cover it. Like those kind of things that people
Yep.
don't think about. And so how can we help, or how do you help people? Because that teenage girl or that teenage boy that's having the issue, they might not want the help yet.
Oh,
You know
no,
what I mean? And so
not.
these parents are going into hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt to get their kids help when the child is just going there to learn the new skills, to learn how to hide better. You know what I mean? They might get some skills that'll plant a seed, but I think you made a good point about that like the person has to be ready, right? But as parents, we feel so helpless. We want to
It
do
is.
something.
Yeah, and I know that's how my mom felt and my
Mm-hmm.
stepdad, putting me at 15 years old.
Mm,
And from that was the beginning
mm,
of all, I mean, the beginning. And now that I have a son, I can only imagine how they felt.
mm-hmm.
Like, what do you do with this? What do you do with Erin?
Yep.
She's dying. She's unstable. The doctors are like, she cannot leave. She's medically unstable. And yet I would go in, it was like a revolving door.
Mm,
And it wasn't necessarily that I wanted, but my body just kept getting unstable. And so they would take me and there was nothing I could do.
mm.
Right.
Yeah.
But again, great insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So when there's not that insurance, and the parents like, what do I do? I've always been, because I mean, I've worked with under 18-year-olds, and what I've seen and what I know to be true is there are ways, but it's the navigation process is tedious, and especially if you don't know. It's like, where do I start?
Right.
And it's kind of like, I know there's Medicare, Medicaid, a lot of like stuff like that. But getting him in to see a doctor who's like whatever, or maybe is like, okay, yeah, there's a problem, and then getting a referral
Mhm.
to a therapist. And so it's always it takes time. And
Mhm.
then it basically, we can push those kids into a treatment, but what type of treatment?
Mhm.
That's a whole other, it's going to probably just be a hospital because no one wants to cover it.
Mhm.
But even in that, parents are spending a lot of money,
Yep.
a lot. And it's hard with eating disorders of finding that rock bottom because you don't know it.
Mm.
You think that you're not, like, you're fine. I disregarded it.
Cuz you probably felt fine, but then you go in and maybe some organs are shutting
Things were
down and you're
messed
like,
up.
"Oh,
Yeah,
whoa."
or I felt really sick, but I was like, "Oh, I'll bounce. Okay, I'll go take a rest. Get me whatever, fine, I'll gain weight, I'll get pissed off, I'll argue the whole time."
Mm.
Um, but I wasn't at that point where I could feel the pain. I always said we were controlling the chaos for 20 years.
Mm. Yep.
And it it was intense of like how much emotional stuff hit my family, but for me, I just was like, "Okay, fine." I'd be pissed, but I would I would do it because I had
Mhm.
to, and then when I got older, it was like, "Erin, if you don't, A, B, C, D is gonna happen."
Mhm.
And luckily, I had a really strict eating disorder specific doctor who knew her shit,
Mhm.
wasn't wasn't about to like, and she knew it, and so I was like, "Oh, no." Like, but I was stuck in that clinic for twice a week, and guess what? It took single case agreements, it took with insurance fighting, and even out of pocket twice a week was $100.
Wow. So
A
that's an
and
extra, yeah. That's just
I
with one
never,
doctor. That's just one. Yeah.
and then she would be like, "If you don't go, here are your consequences."
Mm.
And I'd be pushed into a back of a corner, and then I'd be like, "Fine." I go to another treatment center,
Mm.
and it felt so, sometimes I just felt defeating because I didn't know, or I did, but I felt bad. I felt guilty for being there. I felt bad about myself. So I felt, okay, well, I can't get better, so I might as well just be worse.
Mm.
But I didn't realize how bad it could get, and that my body, when I started getting older, was not listening to me.
Mm.
And then it's all those bills. How many specialists have I seen? Every single type,
Mhm.
legit, and those copays are way higher. Those
Mhm.
tests are a lot more money to get an echocardiogram for my heart, this for my heart. Why is your heart doing this? Wait, your like kidney function is off.
Mm.
See, all the stuff that I didn't think about. And now I'm stuck because I am like, well, my heart is kind of important to this. That's what I
Yes.
was thinking, like,
Right.
huh, okay. But I really wasn't there
Mm.
because I was really sick. I just wasn't, I was like a robot. Like I was living, I was functioning, but I couldn't put things together.
Mhm.
And then when I got so sick that the last 2 years, I could barely function of taking my son and doing what he had to do. I
Mm.
was perfect for him. And I think
Mhm.
all that energy was gone that I couldn't. And so I would go to the doctor. She would say, she said to me the last time I went, she's like, "Do you have a will?" And I said, "A will? A will to live?" And like, "Do I want to live?" I'm like, and she goes, "No, Erin, a will. Like a will if you die, like for your son, for," and I'm like, "No, and you're definitely not going to be on it now."
Right.
Like screw you.
Yeah.
I'm like, "You're a bitch." And I would say that to her, and she's like, "Okay, well, I'm just telling you this, you should do that."
Mm.
And I'm like,
Ooh.
and that was like a thinker.
Yeah. Of like, I'm that bad, huh?
Because she never sugarcoated it with me.
Mhm.
Like, she was legit like, "Go get fluids. Okay, there's another copay to the ER.
Mhm.
Uh, there go get this. Okay, there's another copay to," and it was like, for so many years, it was just like this, and I feel like sometimes we're in that disorder so deep, you don't know anything else.
Right.
You become the disorder. How can you get out of it? But yet you're spending,
Mm.
and the emotional toll and the financial toll, everything is just too much sometimes, so you just keep hanging out and doing what I'm been told. "Fine, I'll see this doctor.
Mhm.
Fine, I'll do this." But then you go and, I'm halfway across the country from my son, and they're telling me all these medical things that are wrong with me, but yet somehow my body hadn't given up, and they're like, "We don't know, you're an anomaly, Erin, that
Wow.
you don't have bone loss. You don't have," which is a huge thing.
Mhm.
"You don't have these things. You haven't," you know, all these things that usually go wrong with someone
Didn't happen.
didn't, except I do have, permanent heart issues
Okay.
now. So I have to take, a beta blocker
Mhm.
every day. So there you go, money's still pouring out.
Yep.
Still,
Mhm.
that you don't realize
Mm.
are my teeth.
Mm.
Never would I've thought in 20 years later. That was my biggest what the like, what?
Yep.
Really great teeth, never had bulimia, you can erode, going to the dentist a lot. I had perfect teeth, no cavities till I was 20. I got one. I was like, "Oh, okay, whatever." Within the last 5 years, and especially this last year, I have spent, no joke, 5,000
Mm.
$5,000 on porcelain crowns for my teeth, which the dentist, because they know my background, were like, "This is most likely they're cracking. Your teeth are cracking because of the malnutrition you did all of those years, and it's now
Wow.
coming to bite you in the ass."
So that's another I never would have thought about that
That one
either.
blew my mind. I was like, "I have perfect teeth. What do you mean?"
See, I would have thought about that more for somebody that struggled with bulimia, right?
Mhm.
I've heard about that, that the decay on the teeth and you can
Yeah.
kind of see it
Yeah, it's real
in the mouth. But I would have never so that's
bad.
wow.
Really? Yeah, right? And I was
Mhm.
like, a new one would come up and they're like, "Oh, no." I'm like, "Oh my god, no." And my teeth, no. I prided myself about my teeth of I'm not
Mhm.
bulimic like that. That's never gonna, because that was my fear.
Mm.
And then this last year, I think a 4, 5, 6, I don't even know how many porcelain crowns. I literally am like, "I don't know what crown you're on, but you're on one, so let's do it."
Wow.
And that's a lot of money.
Yeah. That's a lot of money. And if you think about all the money on the clothes and on the hospitalizations and the insurance and the copays and all of that, but you're here and you're live and you're here for your son and now you get to take
Yeah,
all of this information that you've learned, and I hope people listening as we wrap this up that they can take a look at this and say, oh, like maybe they know somebody who has an eating disorder, or maybe they work with people that have eating disorders, or maybe they have children that are spouses. But like I learned so much from you today. So much. And I hope that you can take like even the light bulb moments that you've had
yeah,
just in thinking about this back to your practice to help other people, and maybe we can shoot people back and forth to each other, because I
right?
think that if we can, I mean, it's this whole and the a lot of the overarching theme of a lot of the podcast interviews where I talk about addiction is this whole external void to fill the internal issues within ourselves. And if
Yep.
we can work on that internal
Mhm.
hole inside of us, then we're going to be in such a better place where we don't need all of that external
Yeah, it's all
validation and
about that. Yeah,
stuff
it's
and spending,
that's my thing, is like, you guys are searching for, like, an external things you use for an internal pain.
Right.
When you work on the underlying pains, you don't need all this extra things that cost a lot of money,
Mhm.
that never bring the joy, because the deep rooted things or even whatever it is that you may not know, but
Right.
whatever that hole is that you're trying to fill, it will never, ever, ever, believe me, I've tried.
It will
I
never get filled.
It
We will
never will get
try.
filled.
And that's, people say they have addictive personalities, right? And
Yeah.
I definitely, probably before my divorce, went through that cycle of I could get addicted to whatever just because I was so miserable on the inside. And I think a lot of me building my business stemmed from being a workaholic for many, many years of just the hustle and like wanting to be amazing and doing well at what I do. And I'm proud of that, but I had to take a couple of years off and like regroup and like all of that. But I'm so appreciative that you came on and talked about this today because I think this is an amazing topic. It's definitely a hard one. For
Yeah.
sure. I learned a lot from you and I want people to be able to like follow you and learn from you too. So where can people find you online and your social channels and everything?
I'm I'm always saying I'm on Instagram. You can come stalk me there.
Mm-hmm.
That's my main place, and it's just Erin Reiland Love.
Yep.
Um,
And I'll put all the links in the show notes
yeah,
of
and
this.
I'm
So
really that's where I'm there, but I'm on Twitter, but yeah, and just whenever I say like people want to get a hold of me, I'm like just link in my bio or my website. Um, because I do breath work, and that really does help calm that nervous that that addicted type personalities can have, is being like this and
mm-hmm.
not being able to go down
Mm-hmm.
and stop that wanting to use drugs, alcohol, eating disorder to try to count. So breath work, I'm such a like big, I love it. It
I love
really
it too.
helps. Oh, it's so good.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I always like come over, say hi. And mine is all about awareness. If I
Mm-hmm.
can help, it's not about me getting clients or this or that. I truly believe the more awareness, the more we can talk about and open up the dialogue about, things that still have stigmas around. And I
Mm-hmm.
think, money, talking about money is like, I don't want to talk about money.
Right.
I don't want to think about it. But that and mental health and how it does, it's so you don't realize it, but even the more we can know, the more knowledge, the more we can understand, be a little bit more empathetic, or also get off our asses and start doing what we need to do to change the trajectory we're on,
Yep.
you know?
Totally
So
agree.
I just, I feel like helping people is um, kind of my mission.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want anyone to have to go through what I went through,
Yep.
you know? So I think it's super important. I like loved thinking about money and my eating disorder.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that it was something that was like new that I was like, we need to talk about this. And
It totally was.
I actually messaged one of my friends who is in recovery from an eating disorder and told her I was having you on. And she was like, this is amazing. Like, this is not something I've ever heard talked about. So hopefully we can bring this about and talk about it because and not shameful. I think that that's what I
No.
want to leave this
Oh, yeah.
conversation with is we've talked about all the money that you've spent
Mhm.
and it's like we don't want to leave this feeling bad, right? We don't want to leave this feeling like, "Oh my gosh, I could have been a millionaire by now." It's like
Yeah.
obviously this was your path, your journey to get to where you are, and if anybody that's listening struggles with an eating disorder or knows somebody, it's like I I always say that I move at the speed of pain. I learn from experience. That's just how I learn. I learn from watching other people's experiences and I learn from going through my own shit. Right? That's
Yeah.
just how I learn. And I wish I didn't learn that way because it really sucks and it's kind of painful sometimes. So,
Yeah.
you know, and sometimes it's just how we have to learn and how we have to learn what we need to do to get to help other people, you
Yeah.
know, so that we have the experiences that we need to be able to coach people like you do.
Yeah. You're right. Like it is like we've gone over, oh my gosh, she spent all this money. Are you kidding me? What? And then they think,
Hmm.
oh, but it's also with this knowledge, it's okay.
Yep.
You don't have to feel, the guilt, the shame. You may feel the, remorse of like, yeah, I could have been a millionaire. Well, yeah, but I also probably could have been dead.
Exactly.
Or I could have, not chosen to finally to change my trajectory. And it doesn't mean you
Right.
always be there. Be grateful that you have gotten the help so far. Be grateful that it is what it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And to take that and know that you're not a bad person for doing it. You
Yep.
are worthy of recovery. You are worthy of having a life, and it doesn't mean you're going to end up spending another however much
Right.
getting help. It
Yep.
doesn't mean that. So definitely want to put that out there, that it's not all like
It's not all doom and gloom. Like there's hope. There's hope. And if you can do
there is.
it,
I know
anybody
it.
can do it. So
That's what I say. If I
yeah,
can recover, anybody, I promise you,
that anybody can.
you can. You just have to be willing to go through the shit.
Yep. Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on and being so open to being authentic and sharing your story, because that means a lot to me. And I think a lot to our listeners. It takes brave people like you to bring awareness to hard topics like this. So I appreciate you coming and sharing it with us today.
So of course.
Well, that episode was so good. And I am so excited that you listened to it. And as I was going through and getting ready to publish this podcast, I realized that I didn't do an outro. So that's why my hair is different in this outro. I dyed it. I can't get away with you guys not noticing that. Right. So I just wanted to wrap up, though, that I was so excited to do this interview, and I learned so much that I wasn't expecting to learn. One of the questions that I often ask people when I'm doing a podcast is, what is a question that I probably won't think of asking that you think that other people need to know about? And one of the things that Erin talked about was about how she would buy all of these clothes, in the anticipation of what she would look like when she lost enough weight to wear them as inspiration. And that would have never crossed my mind on a financial purchase from somebody who dealt with anorexia. Because I would think you don't have to buy food and you don't have to buy clothing, right? Because you're in the same, unless you're losing weight. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know that I did. I know that there are so many people that are being helped by you, Erin. So thank you so much. And I wanted to encourage you to subscribe to my podcast. And I will see you next week for another episode of the Hard Money Talk Show. Bye.